All right. So I've seen a couple videos like this where people say their actual opinion on the Xbox One versus the PS4. And I've discussed individual features. That's going to happen a couple times. I've discussed individual features, but I haven't really talked about my overall impression of the two. And I see your comments sometimes, the feedback that I fanboy over the Xbox 4. And I've also seen comments saying that I fanboy over the PS4 when its reveal happened. And let's drop the actual stuff. So first off, I think a lot of people are reacting to the quality of the presentations that came out from Microsoft and Sony. And as much as I didn't love Sony's, like on a scale of 1 to 10, it was a 5. Microsoft was a 2. It was just crap. They really need someone to help them do this stuff, because I feel like there's a bunch of like software project managers who present to each other and somehow think they're going to be okay presenting to the world when they really need a professional to present to the world. That's the deal. Like, what was his name? Kevin Butler from Sony? That guy was amazing. Everyone loved him. But back on topic. Where Microsoft went wrong is they talked about the damn TV too much. TV and old games. They talked about old sports games from EA. They talked about Call of Duty. Now, of course, they're talking about the next ones, but they're still old franchises. And they talked about sports. Sports TV, old games. Sports TV, old games. Again and again and again. Whereas Sony was dropping new and exciting stuff. And, there were people who didn't even speak English that well talking about it, so the presentation sucked. But at least it was new stuff. And gamers got excited about that. Whereas Microsoft, every time they say TV, there are people who take that as a removal from their gaming platform. There are people who think like, aha, because suddenly it's going to have like a Mission Impossible like Connect television interface, it won't play games well, which of course is not the case. When I look at the specs between them, and to try and cover it briefly, I'll throw an annotation up for you guys who want to see my in-depth spec coverage. But here's the deal. The CPUs on the two of them, virtually identical. They both come with 8 gigs of RAM. The kind of RAM they put in is different. Microsoft chose RAM that is better for the CPU. It's fast, so it has very little latency. Like, you need something from it, you get it right away. The PS4 chose 8 gigs of RAM that's better for the GPU. So even though it takes a while to send its message, it sends a big, bold boatload of messages, whereas Microsoft spends a teeny, fast message. I don't know if that is working for you guys, but that's the deal. Microsoft chose CPU RAM. Sony chose GPU RAM. One's better for one, and one's better for the other. And as a side note, Microsoft has a small amount of GPU RAM to help counter the deficit they have there. The rumors are these, that the source CPUs match, but the GPUs, I've seen Sony say 1.8 teraflops. And I'll get into broader stuff in a second, get out of specs. And for Xbox, there's a rumor saying it's 1.2 teraflops, which would suck. That's too big a gap. And 1.74 teraflops, which is an imperceptible difference. So we will wait and see how the Xbox One actually performs before we pass judgment on its on the rumors. In the last generation, the PS3 and the Xbox 360, I had a preference for the 360. That's just true. But there's a reason, and the reasons apply to YouTubers far more than they apply to regular gamers. It's hard to record in 720p on the PS3 because you can't record without complex workarounds on the HDMI out port. They put copyright protection on it. That copyright protection is really there to prevent recording Blu-ray devices. It's there to prevent recording from Netflix and HBO. On the 360, they didn't put that copyright protection on the gaming signal, but they did put it on Netflix and HBO Go and things like that. To me, Microsoft did it right by letting us record games and not movies, and Sony did it not so right by not letting us record anything. It occurred to me, Sony will probably do it right next gen. And the reason I'm confident is that they have a DVR built into the PS4. I think you can record 15 minutes of gameplay. If they're going to be that gameplay recording savvy, then I wouldn't expect them to be so not so savvy when putting copyright protection on the HDMI out. 1 second. Sony PS3 had other problems for YouTubers. And things like, if you have thousands of messages that people send you, it can take 20 or 30 minutes to delete them all. Friend requests, if you want to clean that up, it takes hours. I give my daughter $10 to do it. If you want to add someone to a COD game, then you need to make them on your friends list. And there's just this long process. And these menus respond really slowly if there's a lot of messages flooding in while you're navigating the menus. I mean, it literally takes like a minute. Like you open a friend request, and then a minute goes by before the system responds. And on the Xbox, that didn't happen. Everything stayed instant. I bet next gen, that's not a problem. I'm going to guess that next gen, they've got all this clever stuff. And I think the PS4 has a chip in it that handles all that like auxiliary stuff. But I don't want to get that wrong. But I'm pretty sure that's the deal. The PS4 has a chip that offloads all that processing that was so slow before. So I'm not as loyal to one system as people think I am. I've owned a PlayStation 2. I've owned a PlayStation 3. I've got two of them. I think I've owned the PlayStation 1 as well. I had Sega Genesises. I had Atari 2600s. I had Nintendo systems. And I've bought them from everybody. And I bought almost all of them. Like I've had most of the consoles throughout my childhood and adulthood that have ever existed. I didn't have the original Xbox, but I was a PlayStation guy at the time. So, yeah. I'm not as biased as guys think. And when I look at the next gen, they are so close to each other that we'll wait and see. On the presentations, like as a guy who speaks for a living, I look at the Microsoft and Sony guys and think, yeah, you probably don't. You present once a year or something like that. They chose the wrong topic. They didn't know their audience. They did it all wrong. Sony was kind of cool in that they talked about new games, titles that we had never seen before. Microsoft, their TV and their sports games and their even the COD franchise, which I'm more interested in than average. I look at and think, I already know what it is, right? I know exactly. It's going to be the same COD that we've had for the last 5 or 6 years. It's going to be a good game, I think. I typically think that every COD gets better than the one before it. I honestly think so. But they're going further in the future, but there's some sort of problem, so they're going to have the same guns they've always had. Whatever, it's it's the same game. We're sure of it. So I think Sony did the right thing in showing us some new titles that we hadn't seen before, and for a bunch of them, I was like, that's caught my attention. I'm interested in this thing. Whereas nothing Microsoft showed us had me thinking like, ooh, like. This is mind-blowing. It's not mind-blowing. Probably play it after this video. It'll be COD. But in terms of performance, they're the same. A lot of guys think that when you develop new features for something, like all of a sudden it works with TV, that it takes away from the gaming functionality. And I don't expect that to be the case. Not at all. I think one of the reasons that Microsoft kind of did better than PlayStation in terms of functionality as the consoles aged is that you have to pay for it. I think I spend $100 a year for our family accounts. That gives us 4 gamer tags. And, that $100 a year from everybody piling on, they keep updating the OS. It's changed a bunch of times just in the last 3 years. That's a natural byproduct of having it be not just an expense, but a profit center. Whereas on the Sony side, they try to keep the operating system secure and bug-free and, performance, but they're not rearranging the layout of the menus and, accommodating new features that are added in and stuff like that. And, Microsoft is over there with like a dozen different radio services and video services and things like that, Sony doesn't have as much, but it's a free service. So you pick what you value. I wouldn't be surprised if the same thing happened in the next gen. Whereas, the Microsoft becomes this sort of high dollar premium place and the Sony becomes a free, also good place, but it doesn't get, every little YouTube viewer on there that you see on the Xbox. We'll wait and see. But there it is. Sony did a better job of presenting, but they're both pushing out the same pieces of hardware. And let the console wars begin.